The Xbox Series X and PS5 have been battling out in the fight of performance and visuals as early on as the year before launch, as developers have readied ports of big multi-platform games on next-generation hardware. On paper, spec sheets give the upper hand to the Xbox Series X, but in game analysis this past couple of months, the edge has gone to PS5 by a margin of several frames per second. But there is one glaring bit of data and a consistent fact that shows Xbox Series X has had the performance advantage all this time. Welcome to the channel. This is Colteastwood. This is a console, gaming, and hardware-centric channel that mostly covers the Xbox platform. For well over a year, we have been reporting that the Xbox Series X would lead the console performance figures with more power and more advanced hardware over the PS5. We're going to take a critical look at that today. If you end up enjoying or learning something new, let me know by liking and subscribing to the channel. Hit the bell to be notified of new content. And let's take a look at Xbox versus PS5 in games. Since November of 2020, Xbox and PlayStation have offered games big and small, multi-platform, shared across both consoles with extremely similar quality and performance targets. Both the Xbox Series X and PS5 have similar hardware and architecture, generally speaking, each with their own advantages and trade-offs meant to aid the development and porting process for game developers, large or small. Generally speaking, the Xbox has a stronger GPU or graphics visuals, and the PS5 has faster input-output, or put plainly, the PS5 is faster bringing visual quality to the screen than the Xbox. But in head-to-head, with big games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the performance target is largely the same. This is resolution and frame rate. Both versions suffered screen tearing, and after optimization patches, both run closer to 1080p 60 than anywhere near 4K to favor faster frame rates at 60 FPS. The Xbox Series X is fully capable of running higher resolution than the PS5, with a stronger GPU, but in the next generation games, the PS5 has been running slightly better than the more powerful Xbox. The problem right now is that there are only two types of games releasing on the PS5 and Xbox Series X: cross-generation games and backward-compatible games optimized for these two new consoles. To understand the difference, we take a look back at the end of 2020 with the polarizing release of Cyberpunk 2077. Barring the Xbox One and PS4 release, let's focus on Xbox Series X and PS5 to understand why the Xbox Series X is not always being bested by the weaker PS5. Cyberpunk 2077 is strictly a back-compat game. It is not optimized for the new hardware in the new consoles, but instead benefiting from the faster processing and graphics power found in the raw hardware, accessible thanks to the complementary and compatible architecture x86, which is also in the older consoles. Xbox Series X runs the game from 1500p up to 1800p at 60 FPS, mostly with dips, while the PS5, which has been keeping up with the Xbox, runs Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p to 1300p at 60 FPS, also with frame rate dips. This is more in line with the some 18% more power we have expected from the spec sheet for the Xbox over the PS5. Games on the PS5 that have been remastered from last generation, like Devil May Cry 5, have been shown to outperform the Xbox Series X in certain modes. Overall, the Xbox is still running a game like this at better settings and performance. The Xbox Series X performs 10 to 20% or more in ray tracing modes versus the PS5 due to the hardware-accelerated ray tracing utilizing more CUs or compute units, even though the PS5 has fewer compute units running slightly faster in clock speeds. Digital Foundry said, quote, "Some devs won't fully utilize the Xbox Series X 12 teraflop 52 compute unit GPU and instead force parity with the PS5 10 teraflop 36 compute unit GPU. This performance delta has been puzzling with a game like Hitman 3, which is largely a next-generation PS5 and Xbox Series X release, which is not a back-compat title, but was built for the most part from a last-generation foundation. Hitman 3 is a beautiful game, and on the Xbox Series X, runs it at an amazing native 4K 60, while the PS5 runs at 1800p 60, some 2.5 million pixels less than the Xbox, which is more in line with the power delta showing the PS5 running Hitman 3 17% lower grade than the Xbox Series X. All of this is down to a couple of factors: optimization and familiarity with the dev kit for each version. The Xbox GDK is some 6 months behind the PS5 kit for experience and time in practice with devs porting games in the launch window for the new consoles. Remedy has an interesting history of working with Xbox as well as PlayStation in separate capacities, and showed quite a bit of favor for the PS4 Pro with the original release of Control in 2019, with a lower resolution than Xbox but much better performance where it counts, in gameplay fluidity. Much of this disparity was patched out later, but the remaster Control Ultimate Edition on Xbox Series X and PS5 see a parity in resolution, frame rate, and graphical quality settings across the board. Xbox has a frame drop bug in a title screen between chapters, but across gameplay, the performance is mostly the same, with a couple of frames being the only dividing factor between the Xbox and the PS5. Digital Foundry tested a true console benchmark by using photo mode with an unlocked frame rate to measure the performance with ray tracing quality mode activated.
Other areas in the game would see, like looking down at the atrium here, around 11% Xbox Series X performance advantage. In maintenance access corridor at the starting elevator area, around a 14% Xbox Series X advantage. The maintenance section foyer thing, and right in your BlackRock processing, 20% difference in Xbox Series X favor. And then there's even outliers there, like 36% or so when looking into BlackRock processing. So over these 21 valid samples that I collected, and I could have obviously done more, but there's only so much time I want to invest into this. If someone wanted to, they could. I got an average lead of 16% better performance on Xbox Series X here in quality mode, parity settings, over PlayStation 5. And
this essentially rendered the two pieces of hardware down to their bare and raw performance capabilities, showing that the Xbox, while ray tracing, the most demanding visual feature in modern games, sees a frame rate advantage of some 10 to 14 frames for every second, and an overall performance advantage of 16% as calculated by Digital Foundry. Unfortunately for the owners of the Control Ultimate Edition, the Xbox Series X version is being held back by the universal settings optimized to max out the hardware of the lesser PS5. And this is the nature of console games that must be set in place by developers, who also have to work extra to cover multiple consoles and PC hardware configurations. Recently, Ubisoft patched the open world shooter The Division 2 from a native 4K 30 on Xbox One X to a native 4K 60 on the Xbox Series X. The PlayStation saw an upgrade from the PS4 Pro at a dynamic scale of 1344p up to 1944p, a visual difference in quality of 2.1 million to 4.3 million pixels less than the Xbox. Now the PS5 runs Division 2 at around 2.1 million pixels less on screen than the Xbox Series X, with lower quality assets across the world. The Division 2 is a back-compat, upgraded and patched game from last generation on new hardware. This shows the downside of the PlayStation hardware-based backward compatibility compared to the Xbox, which uses a correct combination of software and hardware-based back-compat. The Division 2 looks and plays best on Xbox Series X, which has been more often the case regardless of how first patch release games have looked to the community before developers address optimizations in final patches. Some developers, as is the case with NBA 2K21, will choose to find a high-quality setting that works for both the PS5 and Xbox Series X and run them both identically. But there will always be some hurdle or obstacle with the system configuration, which are very different between the PlayStation and the Xbox, but they will see a few frame drops or hitches even when the game or hardware does not seem to be running out of resources. Right now, games are mostly using the features found in the PS5, but not all features found in the Xbox Series X. Things like direct ML, machine learning, variable rate shading, mesh shaders, and sampler feedback streaming in velocity architecture. None of these things are being used on the Xbox Series consoles in games compared to the PS5. Many games right now are targeting similar results on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, but already a large number of games are seeing that performance delta as expected in certain modes or with higher quality settings for Xbox. This is all without tapping into the advanced RDNA 2 features that Xbox has built into the hardware that PS5 will not be able to access until they revise or rebuild the PS5 platform in the near future. We are already seeing major improvements of the Xbox Series X games as developers get more time with the game development kit, and 16 to 18% power delta in all games that are not seeing parity with PS5 show that the raw hardware and performance capabilities in the Xbox Series X will continue to push above and beyond the PS5 early on in a long generation ahead that will likely offer us amazing multi-platform hit and brand new exclusives on these consoles that will last us into the last half of the 2020s. This is Colteastwood. Thank you so much for watching. I know we have all been busy playing a ton of games on the new consoles, but I'm also very aware and sensitive to the many that have commented here that cannot even get a new PS5 or Xbox console right now. Right now, the generation is still in limbo, with most games seeing similar improvements like ray tracing reflections and 60 FPS more frequently, which is worth the upgrade. But thankfully, the majority of these games are still available on Xbox One and PS4 consoles, and I can assure you that they are just as enjoyable and beautiful on your current consoles. Soon, I will be doing a retrograde review of the Xbox Series X for those that want to know if the upgrade after all this time in these new games has been worth it. Look for that soon, but first, I have a special interview with Xbox coming in the next week or so take a second, make sure you click the subscribe button, and turn the bell on to be notified of new content when that interview drops. If you ended up enjoying this video and learning about how these ports work on console, let me know. I tried my best to cut in the best gameplay and footage I had available for each of these games to make the best visual presentation and illustrate this topic. Add me on Xbox and Twitter at Colteastwood. You can join the Patreon or join the channel below and enter into monthly giveaways and get early access to each of my videos about half a day before they go up on the channel. Tell me, what is your stance on the difference between these two consoles and how games will look and run? I think a few frames here or there is really inconsequential, but overall, we will see major differences this year. Let me know in the comments. This is a PlayStation and Xbox related video, so trolls will be out in force saying this sucks and that sucks. So don't be like them, use some vocabulary, and if all else fails, please be nice.